Hello and welcome. We begin with the latest from the Horn of Africa, a region that has been riddled with violence and conflicts. The United States conducted an airstrike in southern Somalia, killing at least 10 terrorists belonging to the Al-Qaeda-linked Al-Shabaab group. In a statement, the United States said that at the request of the Somali Federal Government, its Africa Command had conducted a self-defense airstrike on the 31st of December on Al-Shabaab terrorists. The airstrike, which saw no civilian casualty, occurred in Birzani in Somalia, roughly 35 kilometers from the port city of Kismayo. Now, the U.S., which considers Al-Shabaab a threat to its national security, said that in addition to the airstrikes, its forces also provided support to Somali forces by evacuating soldiers who were attacked while fighting the terrorist group in the region. Now, Somalia has endured decades of civil war, frequent climate disasters and jihadist violence from Al-Shabaab and the Islamic State. The Al-Shabaab Islamic group was formed in 2006 as a youth militia to fight the Ethiopian invasion and occupation of Somalia. However, the group has now morphed into a full-fledged insurgency, seeking control of the Somalian territory. It formally pledged allegiance to Al-Qaeda in 2012 and is now working to overthrow the Somali Federal Government. The group says it wants to establish a fundamentalist Islamic state. Al-Shabaab controls swathes of territory in the southern part of Somalia, and it has carried out attacks in several parts of the country, including the capital Mogadishu, that have killed thousands so far. To counter the growing threats from Al-Shabaab, Somali forces have also launched several military offensives in recent years. They have also partnered with the African Union to curb their rising influence in the Horn of Africa country.
Our forces are actively engaged in high-tempo offensive operations, successfully liberating numerous areas previously held by Al-Shabaab. To sustain and build upon these achievements, we are increasing our efforts in extending local governance in these liberated areas and ensuring that the gains made on the battlefield translate into lasting peace and stability.
To support Somalia's efforts, the United States has also stepped up its investments, especially after President Joe Biden reversed a 2020 withdrawal decision by President-elect Donald Trump. In recent years, the U.S. has been regularly conducting airstrikes on insurgent groups in coordination with the Somali forces. In 2024, the U.S. conducted 10 airstrikes on terrorist groups in Somalia. In the year before that, it had conducted 15 airstrikes, while in 2022, it conducted 13 airstrikes. In 2021, the U.S. had conducted 9 airstrikes on terrorists in Somalia. But in 2020, during Donald Trump's first term, the United States dropped bombs in Somalia over 40 times. Now, the latest airstrike on Al-Shabaab on the 31st of December comes days after the U.S. had conducted another airstrike on the terror group. On the 24th of December, the U.S. conducted an airstrike that killed a senior commander of the Al-Shabaab group, who was responsible for the group's regional governance for 15 years. And played a key role in Al-Shabaab's strategic decision-making. Moreover, the recent airstrikes on Al-Shabaab also followed an attack by the Islamic State terrorists on the 31st of December. In the northeastern Puntland region of Somalia, which was repelled by security forces. So, with Somalia seeing an increase in attacks by terrorist groups day by day, and the government making efforts to counter them, will the United States increase its airstrikes once Donald Trump takes office on the 20th of January? To discuss more on this, we have with us Omar Mahmoud, who is a senior East Africa analyst at Crisis Group and is joining us live from Maputo in Mozambique. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, what strategic objectives does the United States aim to achieve through the airstrikes like the recent one in southern Somalia, which was targeting the Al-Shabaab militants?
Well, the United States is locked into a battle with Al-Shabaab, on behalf of the Somali government. This is a legacy of the global war on terror. Al-Shabaab was seen as one of these key organizations that allied to Al-Qaeda, that the U.S. sought to reduce the influence and basically curb its activities. The U.S. views Al-Shabaab not just as a threat to Somalia, but as to the wider region. And so airstrikes like this essentially maintain a degree of pressure on the organization, and try to sort of hem it in so it maintains its presence in Somalia and doesn't expand outwardly. At the same time, the U.S. is training an element of the Somali National Army. And so airstrikes like this support that unit while it's out in the field, while it's combating Al-Shabaab.
And how does the airstrike align with the broader counterterrorism strategy of the United States in East Africa? And what implications might it have for regional stability?
Well, the broader strategy is more or less one of containment, basically trying to contain Al-Shabaab into Somalia, trying to basically curb its regional ambitions and its regional capabilities. And if you look at who the group, who in the group the United States has targeted through airstrikes, it usually tends to be individuals who have had some sort of external role with Shabaab or had been involved in some sort of external planning. More so than those that have been primarily localized within Somalia. So I think the strategy is basically trying to contain the group while supporting the Somali government forces so they can increase their capabilities to take on the group within Somalia. Part of what's lacking though is airstrikes can only be part of the solution. You can pound the group as much as you want. They tend to replace their leaders quite quickly. It doesn't really seem to make a massive difference on the ground. Yes, it increases pressure. Yes, it increases costs for the group, but it doesn't eradicate Al-Shabaab. Rather you need an accompanying ground element to that, which is where the training of the Somali army comes in. I would even argue you needed a political element of that as well, given that there is really no military solution to a conflict like this.
Right. And what measures are in place to mitigate the potential civilian casualties during such operations? And how is accountability ensured in case of unintended consequences?
Well, it's a good question, and I think one, the U.S. government should also be prepared to answer. But essentially, I think we've seen over the years an ebb and flow to airstrikes. They're not as frequent as they once were. They do rely on a degree of local information before they're launched, and technologically there have been some advances in terms of the actual precision of the strikes themselves and whatnot. At the same time, the U.S. Military has opened up avenues for complaints about some of their strikes and whatnot. But we've gotten a lot of reports then at times that communities feel maybe they're not heard, or that they're not really responded to. Their complaints the U.S. government hasn't really responded to. So I think it remains a work in progress. I think that's still a concern on the U.S. government side, and of course should be a concern going forward, because civilian casualties as a result of airstrikes really only undermines the wider strategic objective, which is basically to reduce Al-Shabaab's capabilities and eliminate sort of support within the population as well for the group.
Right. Omar, thank you very much for being with us on Firstpost Africa and for your analysis and valuable insights there.
Thank you for having me.
From breaking news to the day's biggest controversies, shedding light on the world's top headlines, detailed analysis on the stories that matter the most to you. Catch it all on Spotlight at 6 p.m. India time and 12:30 GMT, only on Firstpost.